Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called What's a Predator? Written by Catfish21SM. All sapient species in the galaxy are herbivores. Some worlds have what are called omnivores that feed on both plants and flesh. When a member of a fauna species dies, it is consumed by microscopic organisms that specialize in the task of breaking it down and returning it to forms usable by plant life. Omnivores, where they exist, aid in this process by speeding it up. Omnivores are peaceful yet solitary beings. All of them have this in common. When they do eat the flesh of another being, they will almost always eat the flesh of a dead being. The only exceptions, while extraordinarily rare, are those that will feed on dying beings in their death throes. A gruesome sight, but natural nonetheless. None of these have ever made it past sapience. Or, if they had, then their uncooperative nature has led them to never advance technologically beyond perhaps the simplest of tools. The most terrifying thing in all of this is that many scientists and biologists theorize what they call a predator, that is a species that feeds almost entirely on the flesh of other beings. Many think such a being to be impossible. Others argue the fact. The theory started with a student, actually. They posed a question as to why omnivores exist in the first place. Below is attached a recording of the conversation that started this entire debate. Yes, what was your question? Well, Professor Yurkov, if a herbivore consumes a plant for energy, then naturally it'll use much of that energy in order to sustain its biological processes. If that's the case, then wouldn't an omnivore receive less energy from consuming a herbivore than it would from consuming a plant? Why then does there exist an evolutionary drive to consume other animals? Oh, an excellent question. Yes, you are absolutely correct. However, there is one thing that you are overlooking. The herbivore will not consume a single plant, but many. Its body naturally takes the energy from these plants and compresses that into a store of energy more dense than what you would find in a single plant. Think of it this way. A machine used to harvest and prepare crops uses vast amounts of energy, more than can be gathered from many crops. Why then is such a machine beneficial? Because it harvests and prepares more energy in the form of plants than it consumes. On a similar note, why is it beneficial to be a herbivore rather than a plant that can produce its own energy? Because being a herbivore allows one to move from one location to another and consume many plants. Simply put, while herbivores do use the energy that they gather from plants, they still gather more plants than they actually need to survive, meaning that consuming a herbivore will result in a net energy gain. To an omnivore, a herbivore is the equivalent of a crop-gathering machine. While it will use some energy for itself, it will still be more efficient to consume its flesh than it would be to consume individual plants. That is why omnivores exist. Thank you. I think I'm starting to understand, but then if it's so beneficial to consume a herbivore, then why aren't there any creatures that have evolved to consume primarily herbivores or entirely herbivores? Well, that's simple. The professor paused for a moment before continuing. That's a good question. I'm not sure, honestly. It would be beneficial from an evolutionary standpoint. The only reason that I can think of is that there would be not enough herbivores that would be needed to sustain a viable population of such a creature. If it did exist, then it could consume herbivores to such an extent that it would drive them to extinction. Then, if it has trouble processing plants, its own species would begin to die off. There are no known planters with enough biodiversity to support such a being. If one ever were discovered, though, that would be an absolutely terrifying thing to witness. Could you imagine a creature specifically evolved to find and kill herbivores as quickly and efficiently as possible? Theoretically, the herbivores would evolve defense mechanisms, and the predators would evolve even further to overcome those defenses. Oh, this is just theoretical and extremely unlikely. I'm going to stop here. Very good question, though. Are there any other questions before I continue with my lecture? I'll end the recording here. The professor later uploaded the clip to the forum of all biological experts and asked if any had heard of such a concept. Many went wild immediately with crazy theories. Spikes protruding from exposed areas to prevent depredation. toxins and chemical irritants used to deter predators, or even used by predators. Terrifying creatures that didn't even exist in the most terrible of fictions until now. This debate on whether or not it was even possible raged on for some time. Some scientists caught up in it began sending probes looking for planets with enough biodiversity to support such a life form. Then they found it, the single most terrifying thing ever encountered. It was a world covered in more than 97% water, most of it shallow reefs. There was a creature that consumed others. It was so fast that the herbivores could not outrun it, and it would snatch them up and eat them whole while they were peacefully grazing on the algae-like microorganisms growing from the rocks. This proof of concept was enough to send people's imaginations into utter chaos. Xenophobia began to spread rapidly. However, people were calmed down after further examination led scientists to conclude that such a being could not enter space, even if it ever did evolve sapience. It only would not be cooperative enough. The reason I bring this up is because of a recent discovery that was made of a planet in the outer branches of the galaxy. It's a world covered in 71% water, and biologists are very ecstatic because it is only the fourth planet discovered with enough biodiversity to theoretically support a predatory species. In fact, it is the most biodiverse planet so far. It's covered in lush greenery, unlike anything discovered so far, and more biomes than are normally present on several habitable worlds combined. The intense gravity is a bit perplexing, but even so, there are signs of not only intelligent life, but a species in its first stages of spaceflight. The earliest reports say that these species called this homeworld Earth and its system Sol. We plan to study them and the world for a short while before we introduce ourselves. If an intelligent species evolved on a world with predators, then what would it even be like? The likelihood of predation is rather low considering that a sapient species was actually able to evolve here. Even so, scientists are ecstatic to be researching the strange new world. Story number 2. Go with the Flow, written by LgFatherAnthrocite. What are you doing? Oh, hey, boss, I'm just watching Johnson, a worker replied. I can see that. What I want to know is why. Shouldn't you be working too? The boss sounded annoyed. Have you ever heard of humans and flow states? The worker asked, keeping his eyes fixed on his human co-worker. What? What's that got to do with anything? Why are you not working? See, when a human enters a flow state, they become hyper-focused on a task at hand and can perform at a higher level than normal, the worker explained. The boss was looking at Johnson, who had his back to the pair. He stood at his workbench and was rocking from side to side slightly. Music was leaking from his earbuds, implying that it was playing at a high volume. Johnson's hands flew around the bench, gathering parts into assemblies, flipping tools into place with the kind of flair and exactness normally associated with well-rehearsed stage routine. What's this flow thing all about? The boss asked after a few moments. Well, Johnson told me about it. Apparently, humans get into the flow of certain activities. I read up on it a little because it sounded ridiculous. Turns out it is well documented. He's concentrating so hard and so focused on what he's doing that he's literally experiencing time differently, the worker said. You serious? The boss asked. If we stopped him and asked, he wouldn't be able to tell you how long he's been doing this. The worker looked at his boss with a grin. You want to hear the most messed up part? What's that? The boss had a quizzical look in his face. He's concentrating so hard right now, his sense of self is shut off. He's like an organic robot right now. No? Yes. The two continued to watch Johnson build assemblies in remarkable speed and accuracy. A few more minutes passed. Is it dangerous? The boss's face squinched in worry. Not normally, but I read that some people in creative flow states, like artists and the like, might forego nourishment in order to continue working. But Johnson will probably snap out of it when the lunch bell rings or someone bugs him. That's good. I don't want him getting hurt or anything, the boss, his face relaxing. Just then the bell for lunch rang. Johnson looked up and sort of surprised for a moment. He put his tools down and turned around. What? He looked confused at the discovery of his co-workers and boss eyeballing him from behind. What? Did you need something, boss? Johnson asked. Huh? Oh, no. Didn't need anything, the boss said, trying to look casual. Right. Well, I'm gonna go eat. You two have fun, Johnson said, turning towards the lunchroom. Does he even know it happened? The boss asked after Johnson was through the door. Who knows? Who knows how weird humans are, boss? The worker shrugged and started towards the lunchroom himself. Freaking humans, man. Freaky. The boss sighed as he headed to lunch. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps. Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.